Every single second of your existence, something is being extracted from you. Not your blood, not your organs. Something far more valuable. An energy so potent that interdimensional entities have built an entire farm system around humanity just to harvest it. And here is the terrifying part. You cannot see it happening. Your eyes are biologically limited, perceiving only 0.0035% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. That narrow slice of reality you call visible light is nothing but a prison for your perception. But what exists in that other 99.9965%? What wavelengths are dancing around your body right now, invisible to your naked eye, carrying information about the most valuable commodity in the known universe? The answer will shake everything you thought you knew about human existence. In 1958, a radio broadcasting executive named Robert Monroe began experiencing something that would change our understanding of human consciousness forever. During routine afternoon naps, Monroe found himself spontaneously leaving his physical body. These were not dreams. These were fully conscious excursions into dimensions that exist parallel to our own. Over the next 4 decades, Monroe documented thousands of out-of-body experiences, each one peeling back another layer of the reality we are trapped inside. But one particular journey would expose the darkest secret of human existence. Monroe encountered what he described as a light being, an entity of immense intelligence operating from a frequency our eyes cannot detect. And this being revealed something horrifying. Earth is not a planet, and humans are not free beings. Humans are livestock. The entity explained to Monroe that when humans die, their energy is released and harvested by transdimensional beings who use it to extend their own existence. This energy has a name. The beings call it Loosh. According to Monroe, Loosh is emotional energy radiated by biological organisms, particularly humans, when they are experiencing intense feelings. Fear, love, suffering, ecstasy, rage, devotion. Every emotion you have ever felt releases a specific frequency of Loosh, and certain frequencies are more valuable than others. The most potent Loosh comes from human suffering, from trauma, from heartbreak, from the deepest wells of human anguish. And Earth has been deliberately designed to maximize Loosh production. Think about it. Why is human existence structured around pain? Why do we experience loss, betrayal, disease, poverty, war, death? Why is suffering the universal constant across every culture, every era, every human life? Monroe's revelation provides a chilling answer, because suffering produces the highest grade of Loosh. The entire planetary system, from government structures to religious institutions to economic frameworks, has been engineered to keep humans in a perpetual state of emotional distress. We are not living in a civilization, we are living in a cultivation system, and the farmers are watching from frequencies we cannot perceive. But here is where it gets even darker. The electromagnetic spectrum contains wavelengths ranging from radio waves miles long to gamma rays smaller than atoms. Human vision captures only the tiniest fragment, wavelengths between 430 nanometers to 790 nanometers. Everything below that range, invisible. Everything above it, invisible. Scientists have confirmed that humans are essentially blind to 99.997% of reality. Now ask yourself, what lives in that invisible spectrum? What intelligences operate on frequencies our biology cannot access? Monroe claimed that the Loosh harvesters exist primarily in the ultraviolet and infrared ranges, frequencies just beyond human perception. They can see us perfectly. They can watch every emotional spike, every trauma response, every moment of suffering. But we cannot see them. We are blind cattle, and they are invisible ranchers. The concept of Loosh harvesting did not originate with Monroe. Ancient Gnostic texts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries describe entities called archons, malevolent rulers who feed on human emotions. The hypostasis of the archons, a sacred Gnostic scripture discovered in Egypt, explicitly states that these beings are psychic vampires attached to the human soul, feeding on emotional energy like fear and hatred. They create dramatic events that generate negative emotions, then harvest the resulting energy. Sound familiar? Every war, every economic collapse, every mass tragedy, every engineered crisis. All of it generates tsunamis of Loosh for entities we cannot see. The Gnostics warned us 2,000 years ago. Monroe confirmed it in the 20th century. And today, the evidence is everywhere, if you know where to look. Scientists have recently begun studying something called biophoton emissions, weak light photons spontaneously emitted by human cells. Research published in 2024 confirms that the human body radiates a measurable energy field that fluctuates based on emotional states. When you experience fear, your biophoton emissions spike in specific infrared wavelengths. When you feel love, the emissions shift to different frequencies. These are not metaphors. These are measurable physical phenomena. And if human science can barely detect these emissions with advanced equipment, imagine what beings operating on higher dimensional frequencies can perceive. To them, every human emotion is a visible light show. Every trauma is a harvest signal. Every moment of suffering is a dinner bell. You are not living your life. You are producing their food, and the harvest never stops. The moment you understand that human suffering is a product, not a tragedy, the entire structure of civilization comes into horrifying focus. Look at the world through the lens of Loosh cultivation, and suddenly, everything makes sense. Why does the news cycle focus exclusively on disasters, crimes, and conflicts? Because fear is the most potent Loosh generator in existence. Why do entertainment industries glorify violence, tragedy, and trauma? Because emotional devastation produces energy spikes that can be harvested from millions of viewers simultaneously. Why do social media algorithms prioritize content that makes you angry, anxious, or depressed? Because your negative emotions are literally being farmed at scale. This is not a conspiracy. This is agriculture. And you are the crop. Robert Monroe's encounters revealed that Loosh harvesting operates on multiple levels. The beings he communicated with explained that Earth was specifically designed as a Loosh garden, carefully balanced to produce maximum emotional output without destroying the source population. Think about it. If humans were too happy, Loosh production would decline. If humans were completely destroyed, the farm would close. So the system maintains a perfect equilibrium of suffering. Enough pain to generate constant Loosh. Enough hope to keep humans reproducing and continuing the cycle. This is why every generation believes things will get better, yet suffering persists across centuries. The farm must continue operating. The harvest must never end. But the harvesters are not content with random emotional spikes. They have refined the extraction process over thousands of years. Ancient structures like organized religion, hierarchical governments, and economic slavery systems were not created to help humanity. They were created to concentrate Loosh production. Consider the concept of eternal damnation taught by major religions. The fear of hell generates more sustained Loosh than almost any other belief system. Billions of humans living in terror of eternal torture, their fear frequencies broadcasting constantly into dimensions we cannot perceive. Or consider the economic system, wage slavery, debt, poverty, the fear of homelessness. These are not accidents of capitalism. They are deliberate engineering. A population in constant financial anxiety produces Loosh 24 hours a day. Even while you sleep, your subconscious worry about bills, health, survival generates harvestable energy. Monroe also discovered something even more disturbing: the reincarnation trap. According to the beings he encountered, when humans die and their consciousness separates from the body, they are confronted with a brilliant white light. Religious programming teaches humans to move toward this light, believing it leads to heaven or enlightenment. But Monroe learned that this light is actually a soul recycling mechanism. When a consciousness enters the light, its memories are wiped and it is reincarnated back into the Earth farm system to begin producing Loosh again. The white light is not salvation. It is the entrance to the slaughterhouse where your consciousness is processed and repackaged for another lifetime of energy extraction. This is why ancient mystics and shamanic traditions warn against following any external light after death. They knew what modern humans have forgotten. The light is a trap. The Gnostic archons operate using the exact same mechanism. According to the hypostasis of the archons and other Nag Hammadi texts discovered in 1945, these entities cannot create their own life force. They are parasitic by nature, existing only by draining energy from organic beings. The texts describe archons as appearing in dreams, influencing thoughts, and generating fears that keep humans locked in material existence. They are intra-psychic mind parasites who access human consciousness through telepathy and simulation. In modern terminology, we might call these parasitic thought forms, intrusive ideations, or engineered anxieties. But the ancients knew exactly what they were, feeding mechanisms for entities that exist in frequencies invisible to human eyes. And here is the truly sinister aspect. The archons and other Loosh harvesters do not just feed on negative emotions. They have learned to farm positive emotions as well. Love, devotion, worship. These also produce Loosh, though of a different frequency. This is why religious systems demand worship, adoration, and devotional energy. Every prayer, every ritual, every moment of spiritual ecstasy produces Loosh that flows upward to entities masquerading as gods. The beings Monroe encountered confirmed this. They harvest both suffering and devotion, despair and ecstasy. The entire emotional spectrum of humanity is food for something that operates just beyond the edge of perception. Modern science is beginning to catch up with these ancient revelations. Researchers studying Kirlian photography, a technique that captures the electromagnetic field around living organisms, have documented that human energy fields change dramatically based on emotional states. Experiments conducted in 2023 showed that trauma, fear, and anxiety produce visible disruptions in the human biofield, disruptions that emit specific infrared frequencies. These frequencies are invisible to the naked eye, but they are absolutely real and they are absolutely measurable. Now imagine beings whose entire sensory apparatus is tuned to precisely these frequencies. To them, a grieving mother radiates like a searchlight. A terrified soldier blazes like a beacon. A heartbroken lover glows with harvestable energy. Human suffering is not invisible to the harvesters. It is a visible, tangible, edible resource. And they have been feeding on it since the beginning of human civilization. The question is not whether this harvesting occurs. The evidence from ancient texts, modern research, and first-hand testimonies like Monroe's is overwhelming. The question is, what can be done about it? And that answer requires understanding exactly what Loosh looks like, how it operates within the invisible electromagnetic spectrum, and how humans can stop producing it. Because the moment you stop feeding the harvesters, you become free. And freedom is the one thing they cannot allow. If you could see the full electromagnetic spectrum, you would witness something that would shatter your understanding of reality. The air around you is not empty. It is saturated with invisible wavelengths, layers upon layers of information, energy, and entities operating in frequencies your eyes were never designed to perceive. The visible light you see, that narrow band between violet and red, is a prison of perception, keeping you blind to the true nature of your existence. But modern science has given us tools to measure what our biology cannot see. And what those measurements reveal is terrifying. Humans emit constant electromagnetic radiation. Your heartbeat generates measurable electromagnetic pulses. Your neurons fire with electrical signals that produce detectable fields. Your cells emit biophotons, weak light particles that pulse with your emotional state. You are not a solid object. You are a living antenna, broadcasting your internal state across multiple frequencies. And something is listening. Scientists at institutions including the Max Planck Institute and research facilities in Japan have confirmed that the human body emits biophotons in the ultraviolet and near-infrared ranges. These emissions are not constant. They fluctuate dramatically based on stress, emotion, and consciousness. A study published in 2024 demonstrated that human biophoton emissions increase by as much as 200% during moments of extreme fear or anxiety. Think about what that means. Your terror is literally visible to anything operating in the ultraviolet spectrum. Your suffering blazes like a fire in frequencies just beyond human sight. And according to Robert Monroe and the ancient Gnostics, entities exist in precisely those frequencies, watching, waiting, harvesting. The electromagnetic spectrum spans from extremely low-frequency radio waves, which can be miles long, all the way to ultra-high-frequency gamma rays, which are smaller than atomic nuclei. The visible spectrum sits in a tiny slice, around 500 nanometers. But the ultraviolet spectrum, which begins at around 400 nanometers, is where biophoton emissions concentrate during moments of emotional distress. The infrared spectrum, which begins at around 700 nanometers, is where thermal and electromagnetic signals from the human nervous system are most intense. These are the ranges where Loosh becomes visible, not to human eyes, but to beings whose sensory organs are tuned to these frequencies. Monroe described Loosh as having distinct qualities and grades. The highest quality Loosh, according to the entities he encountered, comes from emotions that involve deep attachment and subsequent loss. The love of a parent for a child, followed by the death of that child, produces Loosh of extraordinary potency. The devotion between romantic partners, followed by betrayal, generates Loosh of a different but equally valuable frequency. Trauma bonding, where a victim develops attachment to their abuser, creates a particularly complex Loosh signature that is highly prized. This is why human society is structured to maximize these experiences. Romance is glorified, encouraging deep attachments. Family bonds are considered sacred, ensuring profound grief when they are severed. And mechanisms like war, disease, poverty, and crime ensure that these bonds are constantly being shattered, generating endless harvests of high-grade Loosh. But the harvesters are not passive observers. They actively manipulate events to maximize production. Monroe learned that certain entities specialize in orchestrating human experiences specifically to generate Loosh spikes. They influence decisions, arrange coincidences, and engineer tragedies to ensure maximum emotional output. This is not supernatural. This is interdimensional agriculture, and it operates through mechanisms that appear to human perception like random chance or fate. That car accident that killed your friend, that financial disaster that destroyed your family, that relationship that ended in a devastating heartbreak. From the perspective of the Loosh harvesters, these are not tragedies. They are successful harvests, and the frequency signature of your grief is their reward. The Gnostic texts provide even more specific details. The Apocryphon of John, another Nag Hammadi scripture, describes how the archons create what it calls the counterfeit spirit, an artificial overlay on human consciousness that generates false desires, fears, and attachments. This counterfeit spirit is specifically designed to keep humans trapped in emotional cycles that produce Loosh. You think you are pursuing your own goals, your own happiness, your own meaning. But the Gnostics would say you are actually following implanted programs designed to lead you into suffering. The desire for wealth leads to greed and anxiety. The desire for love leads to attachment and heartbreak. The desire for meaning leads to existential despair. Every path you are offered leads to the same destination, emotional suffering that produces harvestable energy. Modern neuroscience is beginning to confirm these ancient insights. Research into neural implantation and subconscious programming has demonstrated that human decision-making is far less free than we believe. Studies show that up to 90% of human decisions are made by subconscious processes before conscious awareness even occurs. You think you are choosing your thoughts and emotions, but in reality, your consciousness is responding to pre-programmed patterns that exist below your awareness. And if the Gnostics and Monroe are correct, those patterns were not programmed by evolution or experience alone. They were engineered by entities that harvest the emotional energy those patterns produce. The spectrum of suffering is vast. Fear operates at certain frequencies, grief at others. Rage, despair, anxiety, loneliness, shame, each produces a distinct electromagnetic signature in the infrared and ultraviolet ranges, and the harvesters have learned to read these signatures with perfect precision. They know which emotions produce the most valuable loosh. They know which life events generate the strongest spikes. And they know how to arrange human reality to maximize production. You are not living in a random universe. You are living in a carefully designed system. And the design is not for your benefit. It is for them. If humans are loosh farms, then there must be a harvesting technology. There must be mechanisms, structures, and systems through which emotional energy is extracted and transmitted to wherever these entities exist. And those mechanisms are hiding in plain sight, operating on frequencies we cannot perceive, using physics we barely understand. Robert Monroe's investigations revealed that the primary harvesting mechanism is consciousness itself. When a human experiences intense emotion, their consciousness generates a specific frequency pattern. This pattern resonates across dimensional boundaries, creating what Monroe described as a beacon. Entities tuned to these frequencies can detect the beacon instantaneously, regardless of physical distance, because the signal is not transmitted through three-dimensional space. It is transmitted through consciousness itself, which operates outside the limitations of space-time. This concept aligns perfectly with cutting-edge quantum physics. Researchers studying quantum entanglement have demonstrated that particles can influence each other instantaneously across any distance, suggesting that information can travel through dimensions beyond our four-dimensional space-time. Consciousness researchers like physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff have proposed that consciousness itself may be a quantum phenomenon operating through microtubules in neurons that interact with the quantum field. If consciousness is quantum, then it exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously. And if it exists across multiple dimensions, then entities operating in higher dimensional frequencies can access it directly. They do not need physical tools to harvest loosh. They harvest it through direct interface with human consciousness. But there are also physical technologies that facilitate extraction. Monroe encountered what he described as thought-form constructs, artificial structures built from consciousness itself, that act as collection nodes for loosh. These constructs appear to human perception as religious buildings, sacred sites, monuments, and ritual spaces. When humans gather in these locations and engage in emotional activities like worship, grief, or celebration, their collective loosh emissions are concentrated and channeled through the construct to the harvesters. This is why religious architecture has such specific geometric patterns. Why are cathedrals built with soaring heights and resonant acoustics? Why temples are positioned on specific ley lines and energy vortexes? These are not artistic choices. They are engineering specifications. The buildings are harvesting devices designed to concentrate and transmit emotional energy. Kirlian photography provides visual evidence of this phenomenon. When researchers photograph individuals before and after visiting sacred sites or participating in religious rituals, the subject's biofields show dramatic changes. The energy field dims, becoming less vibrant, as if something has been extracted. Skeptics argue this is simply exhaustion or psychological suggestion. But if you understand loosh theory, The pattern becomes obvious. The ritual drained their emotional energy, and the sacred site channeled it elsewhere. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable energy transfer, and it is happening in every church, temple, mosque, and shrine on the planet. Television and digital media represent a more modern harvesting technology. When you watch news coverage of a disaster, your fear and sadness produce Loosh, but the screen itself acts as a focusing device. The electromagnetic radiation from the screen interacts with your biofield, and some researchers believe this creates a sympathetic resonance that amplifies the Loosh signal. Millions of people watching the same tragedy simultaneously produce a coordinated Loosh harvest of staggering magnitude. This is why media corporations focus obsessively on traumatic content. It is not just about ratings and attention. The emotional energy of the audience is being harvested on a mass scale. Every viewer is an energy donor. Every screen is a collection point. But the most sophisticated harvesting technology is biological. Monroe discovered that the human pineal gland, often called the third eye in mystical traditions, functions as a transdimensional antenna. The pineal gland produces dimethyltryptamine, a molecule that facilitates altered states of consciousness. In these altered states, the boundary between dimensions becomes thin, and Loosh extraction becomes far more efficient. This is why indigenous cultures use psychedelic plants in ritual contexts, not for recreation, but because those states opened doorways. Unfortunately, those doorways allow traffic in both directions. When your consciousness expands, you become more accessible to entities operating in higher frequencies. Your Loosh becomes easier to harvest. This is why many psychedelic experiences involve encounters with entities, beings of light, or geometric intelligences. You are not hallucinating. You are perceiving the harvesters directly. The pineal gland is also suppressed by fluoride, a chemical added to water supplies in many countries under the guise of dental health. Studies have confirmed that fluoride accumulates in the pineal gland and calcifies its tissue, reducing its function. If the pineal gland is a transdimensional antenna, then fluoridating the population reduces their ability to perceive the harvest. It keeps humans blind, docile, and unaware that they are being farmed. This is not accidental. Every system that limits human consciousness, from pharmaceutical sedation to propaganda to toxic food additives, serves the same purpose, keeping the livestock ignorant and productive. Monroe also described harvesting technology that operates during sleep and death. When humans enter REM sleep, their consciousness shifts into frequencies where Loosh collection is more efficient. Dreams are not random neurological noise. Dreams are engineered experiences designed to generate emotional responses. Nightmares produce fear-based Loosh. Anxiety dreams about failure or exposure produce shame-based Loosh. Even positive dreams serve the harvest, as the disappointment of waking from a beautiful dream generates a specific frequency of longing and loss. And when death occurs, the consciousness fully separates from the biological shell, and the ultimate extraction takes place. The entire lifetime of stored emotional energy is harvested at once. This is why near-death experiencers describe seeing their life flash before their eyes. They are witnessing their Loosh production history as it is downloaded and extracted. The technology of extraction is everywhere. It is woven into the architecture of civilization, embedded in the biology of the human body, and operating through every screen, ritual, and traumatic experience. You have been living inside a harvesting machine your entire life, and you never noticed because you cannot see the frequencies where the machinery operates. But now you know, and once you know, everything changes. The most dangerous information in this entire revelation is not that you are being harvested. It is that you can stop it. The moment you become aware of the Loosh system, you gain the ability to starve the harvesters. And entities that feed on human emotion do not tolerate starvation. This is why this knowledge has been suppressed, ridiculed, and hidden behind layers of religious dogma and scientific skepticism for thousands of years. The farm only works if the cattle do not know they are cattle. The moment you wake up, the entire system begins to collapse, and the farmers will do everything in their power to put you back to sleep. So, if you have made it this far, congratulations, you are now a target. But you are also free, and freedom is worth any cost. Robert Monroe spent the final decades of his life researching how to exit the Loosh farm. His findings are documented in his books, particularly Far Journeys, but they are often misunderstood or ignored. Monroe discovered that emotional neutrality is the key to stopping Loosh production. The harvesters feed on emotional spikes, both positive and negative. So the solution is not to become happy or optimistic. The solution is to become detached. This does not mean apathy or depression. It means conscious observation without emotional identification. When a tragedy occurs, you witness it without collapsing into despair. When good fortune arrives, you acknowledge it without attachment. You experience life fully, but you do not feed the experience with emotional energy that can be harvested. The ancient Gnostics called this state apatheia, often mistranslated as apathy, but actually meaning freedom from suffering through non-attachment. The Gnostic texts teach that the archons cannot harvest energy from a consciousness that does not produce it. When you stop generating fear, they starve. When you stop generating attachment, they lose their hold. This is why Gnostic teachings were violently suppressed by religious authorities, not because they were heretical, but because they taught humans how to escape the farm. A population that cannot be harvested is a population that cannot be controlled, and control is the foundation of every power structure on Earth. Modern techniques align with these ancient practices. Meditation that emphasizes witness consciousness, where you observe your thoughts and emotions without identifying with them, trains you to stop producing Loosh. Trauma processing methodologies that release stored emotional energy rather than endlessly recycling it help drain the reservoirs the harvesters feed on. Even simple practices like breathwork and grounding reduce the intensity of emotional reactions, making you less valuable as a Loosh source. The harvesters want you to be reactive, impulsive, and emotionally volatile. Anything that makes you calm, centered, and aware is a threat to their food supply. But awareness alone is not enough. You must also learn to navigate death without entering the reincarnation trap. Monroe's research suggests that when your consciousness separates from your body at death, you should not move toward any external light. Instead, you should call upon your own internal light, your true self, and declare your intention to exit the system entirely. Many shamanic traditions teach similar practices, training initiates to resist the pull toward recycling and instead journey to realms beyond the archon-controlled dimensions. This requires preparation. You cannot wait until death to learn these skills. You must practice conscious projection, lucid dreaming, and out-of-body states while alive, so that when death comes, you know how to navigate the afterlife without being trapped. Another critical practice is refusing to consent. Gnostic teachings emphasize that the archons cannot force anything upon a sovereign consciousness. They can only manipulate through deception, fear, and illusion. When you explicitly withdraw your consent to participate in the Loosh farm, when you declare your sovereignty as a free consciousness, you create a shield they cannot penetrate. This is not magical thinking. This is quantum mechanics. Consciousness collapses probability fields. Your intention shapes reality. When you intend to be free, you create a frequency pattern that repels parasitic entities. They can no longer feed on you because you are no longer producing the frequency they consume. The final step is helping others wake up. The harvest depends on mass ignorance. Every human who becomes aware weakens the entire system. This is why sharing this information is crucial, even though it will be dismissed, attacked, and ridiculed. The harvesters will use every tool at their disposal to discredit this knowledge. They will deploy debunkers, skeptics, controlled opposition figures, and psychological warfare to make you doubt what you now understand. But remember, truth does not need defense, it only needs expression. The people ready to hear this will recognize it instantly, because some part of them has always known they were trapped. Your job is simply to speak it aloud. The resonance will do the rest. Robert Monroe died in 1995, but his work continues through the Monroe Institute, an organization dedicated to consciousness, research, and exploration. His techniques for achieving out-of-body states are taught worldwide, giving thousands of people direct experience of realities beyond physical perception. Many of these explorers have confirmed Monroe's findings. There are entities in invisible frequencies. There is a system designed to harvest human emotional energy. And there is a way out. The door has always been open. We simply never noticed it because we were trained to look in the wrong direction, to look outside ourselves for salvation, when salvation only comes from within, to fear death when death is simply a transition, to produce emotion endlessly when peace is our natural state. You are not a victim. You are an infinite consciousness trapped in a finite game. And now that you know the rules, you can choose to stop playing, stop feeding the harvesters, stop generating Loosh, stop consenting to your own captivity. The moment you do, you become something the system was never designed to handle, a free human being. And free humans are the most dangerous force in the universe. Welcome to your liberation. The harvest ends now.